All right, folks, so let's continue. So we're still actually on section 5. What I want to do in this section is I want to set up Active Directory on the first server. Remember, I don't have Active Directory yet. My server is a standalone server. So this is actually a standalone server. It's a work group. And I can prove that to you because look what it says here. It's a work group, all right? It doesn't say domain. Remember, there's a standalone server, there's a member server, and there's a domain controller. Right now, it's a standalone server. It's not hosting Active Directory. So if I want to check also, I could go to Tools, Computer Management, and from computer management, I could go to shared folders and shares. I don't see the sysvol. All right, that's one of them. I'm just giving you like one hint over here. Plus, this is not a domain controller because I have my local users and groups, which means this server has its own local user account, its own local groups. It has its own local policies and restrictions. I cannot control it from another server, which is a domain controller. Everything has to be managed locally, as you see. I want to create an actual local user here. So I'm going to call this, let's say, user one. And let me just put an actual complex password so I could follow the password policy. And you'll see why I'm actually doing this. And I'm going to create a group called group one. Watch this. GRP1. I'm going to add user one to the list over here and create it. I could also open the command prompt over here, right? Watch this. Command prompt. Let me just change fonts over here so we could see actually better. And the color to be the text green, as you see, right? And if I do, let me just look at a full screen here. So if I do net share, I could see I don't have the sysvol, right? So that's one thing to keep in mind. But if I do net user, I can see the user that I created, which is user one. And if I do net space local group, right, I can see the group that I created, which is BRP1. That's local to the server itself. So it's not hosting Active Directory. This is my init server that I'm going to be hosting Active Directory. So it's going to become a domain controller. So technically speaking, it's going to be a parent domain. The name of the domain is going to be called udemy.local. That's the name of the company. So the first domain that is established is a parent domain, and it's also called the forest domain. So I'm going to go to manage, add roles and features, next, next, all right, and install the role Active Directory Domain Services. And go next and take the defaults. But look at this. It does a feature for me. And what is that? Look, it does group policy management. You see that? And it also installs the remote server administration tools. Look, if I go to tools, see group policy management, I don't see the RSAT. We'll see what the RSAT is. Look, that's how I could manage the components of Active Directory, which is like there's users and computers, there's domains and trust. Look, I could remove these, but look, all these are different snap-ins that I could actually manage. All right, so I'm going to leave the defaults and see what all this is actually about. So I'm going to go next, next, and install. So I am actually preparing for the installation of Active Directory. The first thing that I have to do is actually install the role itself, right? That's what I need to do, install the actual. I could actually minimize this, just refresh here, right? And I could see, this is my IP address 223.128. Remember, I had to switch to static, right? Let's just take a look at this again. Default gateway is 2, and DNS is actually pointing to myself, as you see, right? So let's take a look and see what's up with the role. It should almost be finished. This doesn't actually take it that much time, and it tells me what features are actually coming with this actual role itself. The ADS snap in, which is the RSAT, right, and the group policy management. All those are going to be part of the package that we actually just are about to finish installing. So let's give this just a few moments and it should be done. Once it's done, look, I want to show you so you don't actually get confused if you see the term Active Directory users and computers, domains and trust, sites and services does not mean that I'm actually hosting Active Directory on the server. No, it doesn't, because that could just only be the RSAT, which is the remote server administration tools. And we'll see what's the role of the RSAT, what's the purpose of it, and what do I actually benefit from the RSAT itself. For now, it's done. So I could say promote the server to a domain controller, but I'm going to click on close. And look, there's a notification. I have to do something. All right. When I click on it, it's like, okay, well, you have to promote the server to a domain controller. show you something. If I go to tools, oh, I see Active Directory, I see group policy. These are the features. So it doesn't mean it's a domain controller. If I try to open, it doesn't work. All right. See that? It doesn't work. It's not hosted yet. So I have to click here and promote the server to a domain controller. See, this is my first domain that I'm actually setting up, right? This is the first domain that I'm setting up over here. So that's one thing to keep in mind. So what I'm going to be doing is the following: adding a new forest, which is the first domain, which is a parent domain, which is actually the forest name and the name of the first tree itself. This option is like for backup. This is actually if I want to set up a different organization, like two companies merging. But of course, here I'm going to set up first at the beginning, add a new forest. And the name, of course, is Udemy. Watch this. Dot local. And I'm going to go next is gonna check on my network to see if somebody has udemy.local and nobody actually does. You see DNS is there, and there's something called a global catalog. We'll see what the RODC is, but look, a global catalog, there's two types for a domain control. It's either a global catalog server or a domain control, and we'll see the difference. Well, guess what? The first server that I set up must be a global catalog. I can tell you this about this. It's like the yellow pages. It has little information about everything. Every time that I log into a system, it requires a global catalog. Anytime that I do queries or searches, it looks for a global catalog. All right, so that's one thing to keep in mind. And look, forest function level, domain function level, we'll be talking about this. But look at this. It be compatible with all the way back with 2008. We'll see the difference between the forest and the domain function level. For now, I'm going to leave it as it is, which means I could coexist with anything that is server 2016 and higher. And this is a password for restoring the database of Active Directory, which we'll be actually looking at, DSRM. So I'm going to put a password. We're going to be using this. And we'll show you how to reset this actual password. And I'm going to go next. Look at this. DNS is configured. I don't have to worry about anything. You see that? I did not get any error messages. Look, if I open my DNS, let me just show you. So I could see only have basic records. I don't have any records about Active Directory. See, it's limited, right? Start of authority member keeps track of how many times the zone got modified. You'll see there's going to be a big change over here, right? So that's one thing to keep in mind. So let me just go back to the promotion and go next. And it's going to show me that this will only have Udemy because, in other words, there's no conflicts with other domains on my network. It's the first initial one. So that's what it's checking. So I'm going to go next, right? Give this a moment. And look, MTDS, that's the database of Active Directory. So how can I tell if a server has a domain, if it's hosting Active Directory or not? How can I tell if it's a server, it's a domain controller or not? Well, I could go to the C drive. There's another hint. And I could check Windows, and I don't see the sysvol. See that? And here I don't see NTDS folder. No sysvol, no NTDS. All right. So that means it's not a domain controller. That's another way to actually uh, sysvol is where group policies are located at. And the NTDS, New Technology Directory Service, that's the database of Active Directory, which is really ntds.dit, directory information tree. We'll see more and more about that. It's really recommended to put it like on a separate hard drive, but for our testing, I'm going to leave it on the same. So I'm going to go next and next, give it a few seconds and see how this works. So it's checking to see if there's any errors or not, as you see. That's what it's checking right now. There you go. It looks like everything is actually fine. And I'm going to click on install. This should not take long, guys. Just to let you know, it's not going to take long. So here is the actual installation of Active Directory. So this is my initial server that is actually a domain controller, as you see, right? So once it's done, is going to require a restart. So once it restarts, this server right now will be called a domain controller because it's hosting Active Directory. So it does have a centralized database that is going to be controlling all types of resources that are actually part of the company itself in terms of users, groups, computers, organizational units, policies, printers, name it, anything is going to be stored in a centralized database itself. Right. So that's one thing to keep in mind. It's all about to actually restart right now. So it looks like it's on the right track. Remember, the protocol that Active Directory uses is called LDAP, lightweight directory access protocol. The protocol that is used to authenticate to verify if you have the right username and the right password is actually Kerberos. So this server is also a Kerberos server that is going to be verifying the authentication, verifying the credentials if I have the right username and the right password. That's what it actually does, right? So this is what we want to verify. And another thing is also what I'm going to check my DNS server and show you how the DNS server actually looks like, right? Because there's going to be extra records in the DNS server itself once it's actually hosting active directory. This will take, I would say, a few minutes, not more than 5 minutes. The first time that the server hosts Active Directory will actually take a while to process just for the first time. So what I'm going to do is, look what it's going to do. Is going to be applying computer settings and all that. So I could actually pause the video and we'll actually continue with this in a moment. All right. So we'll actually be back in a moment, guys. All right, folks, let's take a look and see what actually happened with the server. So let's see over here. So look, here I'm back to my initial server. Let me just log on and look what it says. Udemy/administrator. So this is an actual domain right now, as you see. It's actually a domain controller. So the server is actually hosting Active Directory. This is actually good. Let me just show you how I could also tell that it's a domain controller. Imagine without a domain controller, how can a company actually survive? I don't have a centralized server that can manage all my computers, like in terms of creating user accounts, resetting passwords, unlocking accounts, disabling accounts, policies, restrictions, account settings. All this is done from my domain controller. So it makes everything easier to manage for a network administrator. Now look at this. On the left-hand side, I'm going to see ADDS, and I'm also going to see DNS. So that's just another thing to look into as you see, right? So let's give it a few seconds and you'll see right now it should actually be in the list. It's just refreshing the actual roles at the moment. And I'm going to prove to you that yes, this is actually a domain control. Look at this. This is perfect. First of all, if I go to tools, watch, remember this computer management, I no longer have local users and groups because it's a domain controller. I go to shared folders and shares. I see the sysvol and also another thing, which is the net logon. That means it's a domain controller. Or I could have done this from the command prompt and I could see net here. I could see that it's a domain controller because I have this as well. Another thing I could check and see over here is the following. Under my C drive, Windows, I should see an NTDS folder. It's hosting Active Directory, right? And here is the sysvol, where all the group policies are actually stored. So this is a domain controller, as we see. When I go to local server, and I click on the computer name, see, it says domain right now. See that? It says domain. But when I click on the computer name and I click on change, it tells me this is a domain controller, right? Another thing, what are the consoles? We're going to see each one in details. I'm going to go to the most common one, which is Active Directory users and computers. So I'm going to open that. That's where I could manage my user accounts and groups and computers. If I expand the domain, I could see when I go to domain control, this is actually an organizational unit. We'll see the difference between containers and organizational units, and that's the server that I'm connected to. And it's actually a global catalog server. That means it could process logons and query searches. Remember, it's either a GC or a DC. But if I go to users, well, there you go. So user one got migrated. And look, the group got migrated too. You see that? So, this is where I could be controlling all my resources from. This is just one of the actual what guys consoles. Another thing I want to show you under tools, I open DNS, expand, go to the zone. I see a lot of records. Look at all these folders because it's a domain control. Look how many times my zone got modified. You see that? But if I open the TCP folder, I can see it's a global catalog. Kerberos for authentication, LDAP, the protocol that Active Directory is based on. And it tells me it's actually pointing to server one. So server one is a domain controller. So from DNS, I can judge and see if a specific server is a domain controller or not. And look, these are the actual port numbers that we should actually know, right? 88, 464 for Kerberos, LDAP 389. There's actually a secure LDAP, which is 636, and 3268 is for the global catalog server itself. I only have server hosting Active Directory. That's kind of dangerous, right? Look at this. Let me just actually show you. So if I go to the yellow book and I go to the main controls, I only have one server hosting Active Directory. See that? This is not good. What I want to do is I want to at least have two servers hosting Active Directory just in case one fails. I have another one that is actually up and running. So we're going to see lots of things in more details. But for now, as you see, I was able to set up and install Active Directory on the first server itself. So we're finished with this actual lecture and we're going to continue with the same section, but we're going to use a different lecture in a moment. So we'll see you folks in a moment. All right, guys.